The customs officer at Sheremetyevo Airport holds your passport for 47 seconds. You count them because counting is the only thing you can do while a man in a gray Soviet uniform stares at your photograph and then stares at your face. Behind you, the line is completely silent. Nobody sighs, nobody shifts, nobody does anything that might draw attention. He stamps it. You walk through the doors into Moscow. The cold hits you like a wall. Not just the temperature, but the cold of the city itself, the gray of it, the silence of it, the way every building seems designed to remind you exactly how small you are. You are 26, you are from Ohio, and you have just walked into the most surveilled, most controlled, most quietly dangerous place on Earth. Nobody back home warned you it would feel like this. Nobody could have. You came here on a research fellowship. Cold War-era architecture, Moscow State University. 18 months that your advisor called impossible until the approval letter arrived and he went completely silent for 60 seconds. This is 1973, the height of the Cold War. American civilians do not simply live inside the Soviet Union. And yet here you are, the singular exception to a rule that was never supposed to have exceptions. The Soviet Union is not a country the way America is a country. It is a system. The state does not merely govern here. It is the atmosphere itself, present in every transaction, every conversation, and every queue outside every shop. You cannot buy bread without the state being involved. You cannot have a conversation with a stranger without wondering immediately whether someone is listening. And you, an American in Moscow in 1973, are not merely a foreigner. You are a walking provocation, an object of fascination, suspicion, and dangerous curiosity that follows you everywhere you go, whether you invite it or not. Your KGB liaison, a flat-faced man named Volkov, who speaks perfect English with a Chicago accent he never explains, meets you at your assigned apartment on the first morning. He hands you a laminated card of permitted locations, then a second card, prohibited locations. The second list is significantly longer. He shakes your hand at the door. Welcome to Moscow. Try not to make things complicated. You already know that complicated is precisely what this will become. Your apartment is a concrete box on the 6th floor of a gray building in Izmailovo, small, perpetually cold, and furnished with Soviet efficiency. A bed, a desk, a kitchen the size of a closet, one window overlooking an identical building across a courtyard where 3 elderly women sit on a bench at all hours regardless of weather. You come to understand they are not simply old women enjoying fresh air. Life here runs on a different clock entirely. Queues are not inconveniences in Moscow. They are the central social institution of daily existence. You queue for bread in the morning, meat at a different shop in the afternoon, soap at another location entirely. You learn to carry a bag everywhere because desirable items appear and vanish within the hour, and only the people already in line ever see any of it. At the university, professors treat you with academic curiosity, wrapped in careful distance. You understand why. Any Soviet citizen developing a close relationship with an American faces questions nobody wants to answer. But one person does not keep his distance. Alexei, third-year architecture student, 22 years old. Dry humor, sharpened specifically by years of living in an environment where laughing at the wrong thing ends careers. He begins sitting beside you in the library 3 weeks in. No explanation, no introduction, simply appearing and opening his books. 2 weeks of silent parallel study pass before he looks up and says in careful English, "You hold your pencil like a child." It is distracting. In the specific and complicated way that friendship works inside a surveillance state, you become close. Alexei teaches you which cues are genuine and which are theatrical. He teaches you which conversations to have indoors and which only outside, walking in open air where microphones cannot follow. He teaches you the architecture of Soviet communication, entire paragraphs of meaning delivered through what is deliberately not said, through looks and gestures and the precise weight of silence. Your Russian improves rapidly, not from classes, but from pure survival necessity. You begin thinking in it before you realize you have made the transition, and slowly you begin to see what Alexei has always known, that behind the gray concrete and the laminated prohibition lists and the women on the bench, there are people, fully human. human, privately complicated, quietly resistant in 10,000 small ways the machine cannot fully reach. 4 months in, Volkov calls you in for what he describes as a routine check. It is not routine. He slides a photograph across the metal desk. You and Alexei on a bench in Gorky Park. Sunflower seeds, taken from a distance with a lens sharp enough to read expressions clearly. Your friendship with this student raises questions, Volkov says, folding his hands. You keep your voice completely level. Academic connection, fellow students, nothing beyond that. Volkov nods slowly, the nod of a man who is not agreeing but wants you to continue. Still, he says, it would be better if your interactions remained more general, less specific. Less specific. You turn that phrase over, walking back across the city. In any other country, it would mean nothing. Here, it is a direct instruction, wearing the thinnest possible disguise of suggestion. Back away from Alexei, quietly, without drama, the way things end here, without leaving marks. You sit at your desk that night and think about what it means to live in a place where 2 students eating sunflower seeds on a park bench generates a file, a photograph, and a meeting with a KGB officer who speaks with a Chicago accent. Then, your mail starts arriving irregularly. Gaps of 3 weeks, then clusters all at once. Envelopes opened and resealed with a precision almost invisible. Your research notes disappear twice from your apartment, returning within 24 hours, repositioned so carefully you would almost believe you misplaced them yourself. Almost. You stop sleeping well, not from fear exactly, though fear is present, but from the relentless cognitive weight of living somewhere that requires every impulse to pass through a filter of calculation before becoming action. What will this look like? Who is watching? What does this communicate? You are beginning to think like a Soviet citizen, and you cannot tell whether that is adaptation or something you will not be able to reverse. You do not back away from Alexei. You know you should. Every calculation points there. But Alexei appears in the library 2 days after the Volkov meeting and sits in his chair and opens his books. And you understand immediately that he has already been questioned somewhere and answered and is sitting beside you anyway. Not from recklessness, from something that in this city, at this moment in history, costs more courage than most people are asked to spend in an entire lifetime. You open your books. Nothing is said. Everything is understood. Then Alexei asks you something that changes the shape of everything. His younger sister, 19, a pianist of real talent, has been denied permission to audition for a conservatory program in Leningrad. The denial is political. Their father was a dissenter in the 1960s, and that history follows the entire family like a shadow the state refreshes every few years to make sure it never fades. Alexei does not ask you to fix it. He asks for a letter, your fellowship letterhead, attesting to his sister's musical ability, a document that, arriving from an American academic, might carry enough weight to force a second review. You sit with this for 3 days. Writing the letter inserts you directly into the internal political situation of a Soviet family. It will reach Volkov immediately. It could end your fellowship, damage Alexei's academic standing, and make things measurably worse for his sister rather than better. Not writing it is the calculation this system wants everyone to make. Choose safety over the human thing. Let the machine win in the small, quiet way machines like this survive. Not through dramatic confrontations, but through 10,000 individual surrenders made by 10,000 ordinary people who decided today it was not worth it. On the 4th day, you sit down and write the letter. The letter does not open the conservatory door. This is not that kind of story. What it does is create a small crock in the machinery. The application is reviewed a second time, denied again, but 3 months later, through a chain Alexei traces but never fully explains, his sister receives an invitation to perform at a regional festival in front of exactly the audience that matters. Not the conservatory, but a door opened by someone who decided the 4th day was the day. Volkov's next meeting is longer. The question questions more direct. By the end, you understand clearly that your fellowship will not be renewed, and that your remaining time in Moscow now carries a quality of official attention that will not lift. You have 4 months left. You spend them completely differently than the first 8. Less carefully, more fully. You walk sections of the city that exist in the gray space between your permitted and prohibited lists. You sit in kitchens with people who speak in the layered way Alexei taught you. Everything important living in what is implied, what is omitted, what passes between people in the space where words are too dangerous to exist. You understand now why Soviets are among the world's great readers of subtext. When the surface of language is permanently monitored, meaning migrates underground and develops its own sophisticated grammar. On your final night, Alexei walks you to the metro. You stand at the entrance in the cold. Nothing particularly significant is said. Nothing significant remains that has not already been communicated across 8 months of shared silence in a university library. He shakes your hand, holds it 1 extra second, then turns and walks back into the city without looking back. You land in New York 14 hours later. The JFK customs officer glances at your Soviet stamps, looks up at you once, and hands the passport back without a word. You walk into the arrivals hall and stop. The noise hits you first. The volume, the color, the dense commercial energy pressing from every direction. People talking at full volume about nothing in particular with complete freedom. No filter, no calculation, no awareness of who might be standing close enough to hear. You stand in the middle of it all and feel, for the first time in 8 months, completely lost. Because somewhere between the cues and the concrete and the laminated prohibition lists and the kitchen conversations and the photograph of 2 people eating sunflower seeds on a park bench, somewhere inside all of that, something shifted in you that the arrivals hall at JFK has no framework for. You are home. You know that. But the person standing here is not the same person who left. You think differently now. You listen to conversations in a way that makes people slightly uncomfortable. You notice exits. You read rooms. You hear what is not being said with the same clarity as what is. You have developed, without intending to, the specific interior architecture of someone who has lived for 8 months in a place where survival required it. 3 weeks after you return, 2 men in civilian clothes visit your apartment. They carry no identification you are shown. They ask questions for 2 hours, careful, layered questions that tell you, in the way that Alexei taught you to read things, far more about what they already know than about what they're trying to find out. When they leave, you sit in the silence of your American apartment and understand something that reframes everything, every coincidence, every bureaucratic miracle, every unopened door that somehow opened anyway. Your fellowship was not an accident. Your presence in Moscow was never entirely what you were told it was. And the question that will stay with you for the rest of your life is not what they wanted from you while you were there. It is whether you gave it to them without ever knowing you did.